A brilliant astronaut, hero of NASA, pioneer of space, a man who'd stared into the void and laughed. But on one storm-soaked night, he did the unthinkable. He aimed a gun at the man who'd sworn to love him forever, and pulled the trigger. What could drive someone to such a desperate act? Lies. Not just any lies. A secret so monstrous, so cold, it rewired his very soul. This wasn't a crime of anger. This was revenge served in the silence of a hollow marriage. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why. Welcome to Vic's True Crime Stories. Buckle up. Let me tell you about Malcolm Turner, a man who reached for the stars while carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Picture a young boy sitting rigid in a church pew, his small hands clenched tight as his father's booming voice condemned sinners from the pulpit. That was Malcolm's childhood, a constant battle between the person he was and the person his preacher father demanded he become. Every Sunday, he'd sit there listening to sermons about damnation, while secretly praying his deepest truth wouldn't show on his face. The day Malcolm finally stepped out of his father's shadow was the day he first looked through a telescope. There was something about the vast, accepting darkness of space that called to him. While his father saw only sin in the night sky, Malcolm saw possibility. He saw freedom. And so began his impossible journey, a black gay man from the South determined to conquer NASA's most elite program. The obstacles were endless. The doubters were everywhere. But Malcolm had a fire in him that couldn't be extinguished, not by his father's disapproval, not by the closed doors of the old boys club at NASA. He fought for every opportunity, trained twice as hard as anyone else, and when he finally got his chance to walk among the stars, he made history. But here's the cruel irony. Malcolm could navigate the infinite dangers of space, yet he couldn't see the danger right in front of him on Earth. Enter Eli Jameson. Picture this, mission control at Johnson Space Center, the glow of monitors reflecting off faces tense with concentration. Among them, one man stands out, charming smile, easy confidence, eyes that lingered just a second too long when Malcolm spoke. Eli wasn't just another engineer. He had a way about him, a magnetic pull that drew people in. When he laughed, you wanted to laugh with him. When he focused on you, you felt like the most important person in the room. Their courtship was something out of a dream. Late nights reviewing flight plans that turned into breakfast dates. Stolen kisses between simulations. The way Eli would bring Malcolm coffee exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, without ever being told. When Eli proposed under the stars at the very observatory where Malcolm had first dreamed of space, it felt like destiny. Their wedding day was everything Malcolm had ever wanted, surrounded by colleagues who'd become family, exchanging vows with a man who seemed to truly see him. For the first time in his life, Malcolm felt completely, utterly loved. But love can be the most dangerous illusion of all. Because while Malcolm was floating in the peaceful silence of space, Eli was busy laying groundwork back on Earth. It started small, suggestions about merging their finances, talks about the future. "You're up there risking your life," Eli would say, his voice full of concern. "We should make sure you're protected." And so Malcolm signed the papers that made Eli the sole beneficiary of his life insurance policy. A $5 million safety net. At the time, it felt like love. Looking back, it was the first thread being pulled in a tapestry of lies. Then there was Marina. Sweet, struggling Marina, Eli's childhood friend who just needed a little help getting back on her feet. Malcolm didn't think twice about offering their spare room when Eli said she'd fallen on hard times. He'd smile at the way she doted on her toddler, never suspecting the truth that was right in front of him. Because here's what Malcolm didn't know. That nervous habit Marina had of biting her lip when Eli entered the room? That wasn't anxiety. The way Eli would sometimes call the baby by a nickname no one else used? That wasn't coincidence. The late nights when Eli claimed to be working, the phone calls that always went to voicemail when Malcolm was home, these weren't just the stresses of a demanding job. They were the cracks in a perfect facade, the warning signs Malcolm was too love-blind to see. Because while he was training for his most dangerous mission yet, a spacewalk with razor-thin margins for error, Eli was counting down the days. Not with worry, but with anticipation. $5 million buys a lot of freedom. And for Eli, Malcolm's life was just the price of admission. The cracks began appearing slowly, like hairline fractures in crystal, nearly invisible at first, but destined to shatter everything. It started with Marina. Sweet, vulnerable Marina with her tired eyes and nervous smile. The day Eli brought her home, she was clutching a suitcase in one hand and a toddler in the other. Just until she gets back on her feet, Eli had said, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders. Malcolm, ever the kind soul, didn't hesitate to open their home. After all, what were friends for? But there were moments. Oh, there were moments that should have set alarm bells ringing. Like the way Marina's baby girl would light up when Eli walked into the room, tiny arms reaching for him with a familiarity that went beyond casual friendship. That one afternoon when the child's garbled "dada" slipped out as Eli bounced her on his knee. Eli had laughed it off. Kids say the darndest things. While Marina nearly choked on her tea. Malcolm chuckled along, dismissing it as a toddler's innocent mistake. But mistakes often reveal uncomfortable truths, don't they? Late nights became more frequent. Eli would disappear into his study, claiming urgent work calls. Malcolm would hear the murmur of hushed conversations through the door, the sharp edge in Eli's voice that never appeared during their daytime interactions. One evening, Malcolm brought coffee to the study only to find the door slightly ajar. Eli's words froze him in place. Just a few more weeks. The mission parameters are risky, if all goes according to plan. The conversation cut off abruptly when Eli noticed the shadow in the hallway. Budget meetings, he explained with that easy smile. NASA's always cutting corners. Then came the mission assignment, a complex spacewalk repair that had even veteran astronauts shifting uneasily during the briefing. The kind of job where one wrong move could mean floating away into endless blackness. Malcolm noticed how Eli had been unusually involved in the planning, how he'd championed Malcolm for the assignment despite its dangers. "You're the best they've got," Eli had said, squeezing his hand. At the time, it felt like support. Later, Malcolm would wonder if it was something far more sinister. The night before launch, Malcolm found Eli hunched over paperwork at the kitchen table. Bank statements with alarming red numbers, credit card bills with late payment stamps, loan documents with terms that made Malcolm's stomach turn. Eli quickly gathered them up, laughing about grown-up problems Malcolm shouldn't worry about before his big day. But the numbers told a story Eli never would. A mountain of debt, a man drowning in financial obligations with only one way out. That insurance policy. That $5 million safety net with Eli's name written all over it. Suddenly, all those casual conversations about being prepared took on a darker meaning. The way Eli had insisted Malcolm take this particular mission. The strange phone calls. Marina's lingering presence. The puzzle pieces were all there. Malcolm just hadn't wanted to see the picture they formed. As he suited up for the most dangerous spacewalk of his career, Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger wasn't in the endless vacuum of space, but in the home he'd built with the man he loved. The countdown began. The hatch opened. And as Malcolm stepped out into the starry abyss, he realized with chilling clarity, if anything went wrong out here, there were people on Earth who wouldn't just accept his death. They were counting on it. The truth came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, delivered by the most unlikely messenger. Marina stood at Malcolm's front door, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the phone she was clutching. The baby wasn't with her this time. There were no tears, no hysterics. Just a hollow look in her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and a conscience that could no longer be silenced. "You need to see this," she whispered, pressing her phone into Malcolm's hand. The screen illuminated with a string of messages that would unravel Malcolm's entire world. "Once he's gone, we can finally be a real family." Eli's words, in black and white, sent just 3 days before Malcolm's dangerous spacewalk. "The insurance payout will fix everything." Message after message, planning a future that didn't include Malcolm. A future built on his grave. The dates went back years, before the wedding, before the shared home, before all those whispered promises in the dark. 5 years of marriage, and the crushing realization: Malcolm had never been Eli's true partner. He'd been the mark, the paycheck, the obstacle standing between Eli and the life he really wanted. Malcolm's hands trembled as he scrolled further, uncovering photos he was never meant to see. Eli and Marina at what looked like a courthouse, her wearing white, him in a suit. A date stamp from 2 years before Malcolm's own wedding. And then the final blow, a birth certificate listing Eli as father to Marina's child. The proof had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. The way Eli always knew exactly how to soothe the baby when she cried. The secret smiles exchanged when they thought Malcolm wasn't looking. All those work trips that coincided with the child's birthdays. When Eli came home that evening, he found Malcolm waiting in the dim living room, the glow of the phone screen casting eerie shadows across his face. "Marina's unstable," Eli laughed nervously, the moment he saw the device in Malcolm's hand. "You'd believe some texts over me?" But Malcolm wasn't laughing. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into the drawer where Eli kept his most private things, the one that was always locked until today. Out came their wedding photo, the one that supposedly marked the beginning of their love story. Malcolm turned it over, revealing the inscription on the back in Eli's handwriting: "To Marina, our little joke. Soon this will be real." Dated 1 month before Malcolm had even proposed. The silence that followed was heavier than the vacuum of space. Eli's charming mask slipped away like melting ice, revealing the cold calculation beneath. No more lies. No more excuses. Just the naked truth hanging between them. Malcolm could see it in Eli's eyes, the moment he realized the game was up. There was no anger, no pleading. Just a quiet resignation. And that was perhaps the most devastating realization of all. Eli didn't even care enough to fight for the lie anymore. The hours that followed moved like molasses. Malcolm sat motionless in their bedroom, turning the gun over in his hands. The same one he'd kept from his military days, the one Eli had always joked was so dramatic. The irony tasted bitter. Outside, the rain began to fall, each drop hitting the window like a ticking clock counting down to an inevitable conclusion. Memories flashed unbidden, Eli grinning as he slipped the ring on Malcolm's finger. Eli cheering from mission control when Malcolm's first launch succeeded. Eli whispering, "I love you," with such conviction that Malcolm had believed every word. The bedroom door creaked open. Eli stood silhouetted in the doorway, his expression unreadable. No last words were exchanged. None were needed. The gunshot echoed through the house, sharp and final. As Eli crumpled to the ground, Malcolm sank to his knees, staring at his own hands like they belonged to a stranger. The hands that had fixed spacecrafts, that had floated among the stars, that had once cradled Eli's face with such tenderness. Now they were stained with the blood of the man who had made him believe in love, only to reveal it had all been an elaborate con. In the terrible quiet that followed, with the rain still drumming against the windows and the acrid smell of gunpowder hanging in the air, Malcolm made no move to call for help. He simply sat there, watching the life drain from Eli's eyes, wondering which of them had truly died in that moment. The man who had pulled the trigger? Or the man who had believed in happily ever after? The police would arrive soon enough. The handcuffs would click. The questions would come. But none of that mattered anymore. The truth was out. The charade was over. And in the wreckage of their perfect lie, only one question remained. Had Eli ever loved him at all? Or had Malcolm been just another mission to complete, another obstacle to overcome? The answer, like the man who could have given it, was gone forever. The courtroom was eerily silent as the judge prepared to deliver the sentence. Malcolm sat perfectly still in his chair, his hands folded neatly on the table before him. His face showed no emotion, no anger, no sadness, not even regret. Just an emptiness that seemed to stretch far beyond those 4 walls. The same hands that had fixed delicate spacecraft instruments, that had floated weightlessly among the stars, now rested motionless in the harsh fluorescent light of a criminal courtroom. When the judge spoke, His voice echoed through the silent room. 25 years to life. The words hung heavy in the air. Some in the gallery gasped. Reporters scrambled to type the news. But Malcolm... He simply nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. As the bailiffs moved to lead him away, his eyes briefly met Marina's in the crowd. She looked different now. No longer the nervous, fragile woman he'd taken into his home. There was a hardness to her face, a set to her jaw that suggested she'd gotten exactly what she wanted, yet found it tasted bitter. The prison walls closed around Malcolm like the hatch of a spacecraft sealing shut. Only this time, there would be no triumphant return to Earth. No cheering crowds. No loving husband waiting to welcome him home. Just years stretching endlessly ahead in a concrete cell barely large enough to turn around in. The other inmates whispered about him at first, the astronaut who had fallen so far. But eventually, even that novelty wore off. Months passed. Then years. Malcolm moved through his sentence like a ghost, never causing trouble, never drawing attention. He worked in the prison library, quietly repairing broken bindings with the same precision he'd once used to fix satellites. The outside world moved on without him. New astronauts made history. New scandals captured headlines. His story faded into obscurity. Then one day, a visitor came. Marina stood on the other side of the glass, older now, with lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She picked up the phone receiver slowly, as if unsure what to say. Malcolm didn't reach for his. He simply looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since that terrible night. The woman who had been both victim and villain in this twisted tale. The mother of Eli's child. The keeper of secrets that had destroyed lives. She said something then, her lips moving behind the glass. Maybe an apology. Maybe an explanation. Maybe just goodbye. Malcolm would never know. He turned away, walking back to his cell with the same measured steps he'd used to approach the witness stand all those years ago. Some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. Some truths, once revealed, could never be unseen. And some betrayals ran so deep that 25 years wasn't nearly enough time to forget. As the cell door clanged shut behind him, Malcolm lay on his narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere beyond those walls, the stars still shone. Somewhere, the International Space Station still orbited, carrying new dreams and new hopes. But down here, on solid ground, there were only consequences. Only memories. And the haunting knowledge that the man who had reached the heavens had ultimately been brought down by the most earthly of emotions. Love twisted into something unrecognizable, something deadly. The final irony. In all his years of space travel, Malcolm had never truly been weightless until now. Untethered from everything that had once given his life meaning, drifting endlessly through the void of his own making. Malcolm's story forces us to stare into some uncomfortable truths about the human heart. How thin is the line between love and obsession? Between devotion and destruction? Here was a man who had literally touched the stars, yet couldn't see the darkness in the man who shared his bed. A genius who could calculate orbital trajectories with perfect precision, but couldn't add up the clues right in front of him. The law had its say, 25 years, no parole. The courts don't recognize broken hearts as mitigating circumstances. But you've seen the whole story. You've walked in Malcolm's shoes during those final earth-shattering moments when the man he loved became a stranger before his eyes. So I ask you, if you discovered your entire life was an elaborate con, your love a calculated performance, your future nothing but a financial transaction, what would you have done? Could anyone truly say they'd walk away calmly? Or would something inside you break in ways no jury could ever understand? Until next time, keep your eyes open, your heart guarded, and remember, not all dangers lurk in the shadows. Some come wrapped in wedding vows and whispered sweet nothings. Sweet dreams. If you found this story important, share it. Let more people see what really happens. And if you want to hear more true crime cases like this, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories out there, some waiting to be told, others still unfolding. This is Vic's True Crime Stories. See you next time.